I've been really on my own when I think about it. Yeah, my house is not a home when I think about it. I've been feeling so alone when I think about it. Yeah, nobody really got me when I think about it. I'm really on my own when I think about it.
We back with some more South Park, the worst South Park characters and why they suck. Let's jump up in it.
It should come as a surprise to no one when we say that South Park has one of the most expansive and entertaining casts out of any cartoon in history. Whether that be the iconic main characters, Stan, Kyle, Kenny, and Cartman, or any of one of the thousands of one-off gag characters, like a Taco who poops ice cream or Mel Gibson. There are very few characters in South Park's history who we would say we genuinely dislike. With that said, the multiple decades worth of content that this show has produced allowed for the conception of a few characters who do genuinely get under the skin of fans. Whether it be a recurring cast member, or a one-off character we never heard from again, which residents of this little mountain town are the most annoying? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and these are the worst South Park characters and why they suck. Let's start the video off by talking about the first character that comes to most people's minds when the discussion of lackluster South Park characters is brought up. That of course being Pip. If you haven't watched the first 4 seasons of South Park, you probably have no idea who this character is, and for good reason. Pip was a British exchange student who attended South Park Elementary with the main characters. Long before the show had developed other side characters like Jimmy, Craig, Token, and Tweak, Pip was the classmate who Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny were seen interacting with the most outside of their own group. Designed to be annoying, frequently being mocked and picked on by his fellow classmates who often mislabel him as French.
Hello, I'm a British person.
Unfortunately, Pip may have fulfilled this role a little too well, as he's often hated not only by his classmates, but South Park's audience as well. While making frequent appearances in Season 1, Pip's prominence diminished quite quickly after that, with only the occasional line until receiving his very own episode in Season 4. Sadly for him, Pip's starring role is often considered to be one of the worst episodes in the show's history, which diminished his prominence even more. A big part of the reason Pip faded into the background was due to the conception and development of Butterscotch, a much more popular character who essentially filled the same role that Pip did in earlier seasons. Pip did briefly reappear in episode 201, where he was subsequently killed by Mecha Streisand. Rest in peace, Pip. You may be gone, but you're not, who are we talking about again? Next up, Towley takes us down to Funky Town.
Man.
Before you raise your torches and pitchforks, allow us to explain. We actually love Towley. Voiced by South Park writer Vernon Chapman, Towley is a character whose main passions in life are getting high and giving towel-related advice to the residents of South Park. Did I forget to mention he's also a sentient towel created by the corporation Tynacore to spy on the lives of humans? For as weird as he is, Towley has become a favorite among South Park fans, and he has appeared much more in recent seasons due to the show's growing emphasis on the marijuana industry.
I'm addicted to marijuana.
So if he's so beloved, why does he make an appearance in this video? The simple answer to that question is that Towley was designed to be a terrible character from the get-go. By the time the 5th season of South Park had rolled around, its creators were more than aware that the show had entered the zeitgeist and was being heavily merchandised. As a response, they intentionally created a character who was lazily designed and only existed to spout catchphrases and sell merchandise. They even went as far as to create a fake commercial for Towley within the episode.
That's actually hella smart on their part. I like how they think, man. But me personally, I never really liked Towley. Like, it just wasn't my character. Like, I never really liked him. I thought he was stupid. But, you know, hey, to each their own. Maybe he'll grow on me. I am watching South Park, the new seasons of South Park on Patreon. So if you want to see those reactions, go over there, man. Patreon.com/SimbaTv.
Episode to hammer this point home. The great irony of this is that Towley did become one of the most popular and merchandisable characters in South Park's history, especially among stoners and towel fanatics. Mostly the former. Much like Pip, Towley seems to have served his purpose a little too well. Cartman literally remarks at the end of an episode that Towley is, quote, the worst character ever. Granted, not every Towley appearance is a home run, especially with him being the focus of A Million Little Fibers, one of the most hated South Park episodes in existence. Maybe that's another reason for him to be featured in this video. While we're on the topic of a million little fibers, let's talk about Gary and Minji. For those of you who were fortunate enough to miss this episode, let's give a brief synopsis about who these two are. Gary and Minji are Oprah Winfrey's sentient anus and vagina who often converse with each other unbeknownst to Oprah. Due to being neglected by Oprah, Gary and Minji plot together to get Oprah cancelled so that she can give them more attention.
You got a plan, Minji?
After this fails, Minji becomes hostile and takes Oprah's audience members hostage, after gunning down a police officer in the process. Before Minji and Gary can escape to France though, they both die in a shootout with the cops. South Park has always been a very bizarre and surreal show, but many believe the inclusion of Gary and Minji's story to be a little too much. The strangeness of this plot, especially when paired up with a story about a towel selling an autobiography, managed to make for one of the most unique episodes of South Park, but not in a good way. Gary and Minji's portion of this episode maybe could have worked if there was something else grounded in the episode to level out the weirdness, but it was just too chaotic to reach its full potential. As such, Gary and Minji remain forgotten, only being brought up occasionally to be criticized by people on the internet. Another early season character who is no longer with us is Miss Veronica Crabtree. In the first few seasons of South Park, Miss Crabtree appeared frequently as South Park Elementary's bus driver, often picking up the boys from their iconic bus stop. Portrayed as mentally unstable and suffering from severe anger issues, Miss Crabtree's defining characteristic was her loud screaming, often telling kids to sit down and shut up. The only time Miss Crabtree was a main character in an episode was in The City on the Edge of Forever, where she abandoned her stint as a bus driver in favor of becoming a stand-up comedian. However, since the events of that episode turns out to be Stan's dream, that small bit of character development that Miss Crabtree received was essentially retracted. She eventually fell by the wayside, like many other early season South Park characters, and it's not hard for us to see why. While her unrestrained anger was amusing at first, it's not really enough on its own to develop a compelling character, and Matt Stone and Trey Parker clearly realized that. Miss Crabtree was eventually killed off in the season 8 episode, Cartman's Incredible Gift. Upon discovering her body, Detective Mitch Murphy comments that she was, quote, an ancillary character, one the fans wouldn't miss much. Sadly for her, we think that's a very accurate description. Another character who's been on the show ever since season 1 is Principal Victoria. We seem to be giving South Park Elementary a hard time today, but not everyone can have the same lasting impact as Chef, Mr. Garrison, or Mr. Mackey. And Principal Victoria is probably the most prominent forgettable character in the first 19 seasons of the show. We understand that Principal Victoria is much more grounded than those aforementioned characters, but there's a difference between being grounded and being boring. Ask any South Park fan what their favorite Principal Victoria moment from the series is, and we're willing to bet they'll struggle to come up with an answer, if they even find one at all. Principal Victoria was fired off screen before the events of season 19, and replaced with PC Principal.
With the what?
The character was so insignificant that her partial exit from the show wasn't even deemed important enough to give her screen time. We also realize that PC Principal himself has received a mixed response from fans, with some finding him a funny addition to the cast, and others finding him one-note and annoying. Say what you want about the character, but at least he's memorable and makes an impact, which is much more than we can say for Principal Victoria. The final staff member of South Park Elementary we'll be talking about today is Miss Diane Chokesondick. She was introduced in season 4 as the new teacher for the boys once they all transitioned from 3rd grade to 4th grade. This character is essentially limited to 2 jokes, those being her name and her gross appearance. She also has a lazy eye, if you want to count that as a 3rd joke, I guess. And aside from her initial appearance in the episode Proper Condom Use, Miss Chokesondick didn't really have much prominence in the series and mostly served her one and only purpose as the boys' teacher. Making fun of a character's name and appearance can only go so far, and South Park showrunners seemingly became well aware of this, considering she only lasted 2 seasons amongst the cast. She was killed off in the season 6 episode Professor Chaos, which was expanded upon in its follow-up The Simpsons Already Did It.
Go ahead, whip them out, and I'll suck them.
As morbid as it sounds, the situation surrounding her death was much funnier and more memorable than anything she did while alive. Much like Miss Crabtree and Pip, we don't know of too many South Park fans who were upset to see this character be written off the show permanently. Let's move away from the school staff and towards the city council to talk about Mayor McDaniels. This is another character who has been with the show from season 1 and has retained quite a bit of prominence. That makes total sense to us as she is the mayor of the town the show is named after. Much like Principal Victoria though, Mayor McDaniels fails to leave much of an impact despite being in many episodes. We will admit that Trey Parker seems to struggle a bit more with writing funny female characters, and Mayor McDaniels is another example of that shortcoming. That said, she does have some interesting aspects to her character. She's corrupt, has a superiority complex, and despises the town she runs, all of which could be interesting aspects. That said, these parts of her personality are not expanded on enough for it to really matter. Thus, Mayor McDaniels feels like a much more mechanical character who exists mostly to move the plot forward, rather than being a funny character in herself. Finally, let's end this video by talking about possibly the most hated one-off characters in the series, the Jack-Officers. Appearing in the episode title of the same name, the Jack-Officers are technically a species with the prominent members being Jagoff and Junjun. Since the species all look and act very similarly, we're gonna give them a collective ranking. The Jack-Officers are a parody of the Star Wars character Jar Jar Binks. Much like other episodes, this episode was created out of the distaste that the South Park characters had for the Star Wars prequels, specifically the Phantom Menace and the Jar Jar Binks character in particular. While making fun of Jar Jar Binks is pretty commonplace nowadays, this episode was aired only 1 month after the release of the film, quite possibly marking the first time the characters were parodied on national TV. We do give them credit for being timely, but many fans feel that the Jack-Officers may have served their purpose a little too well. While not as widely despised as, say, A Million Little Fibers or Pip, Jack-Officers is cited by many South Park fans as being one of the weakest episodes in the series, mostly due to the sheer annoyance they experienced as a result of the titular characters. Parodying a character like Jar Jar Binks may sound easy on paper, but in execution it runs the risk of being too accurate. Who would have thought that lampooning a bad comic relief character would lead to, well, bad comic relief? But let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us which South Park character you think sucks the most. Make sure to hit that notification bell and...
Man, I love South Park, but I mean, sometimes, you know, they be missing. They be missing sometimes, but that's like every show, man. If you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button for me. Thank you guys for commenting, sharing, and subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.